I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The MV Ruby is a sorry tale of bad decision-making by government and a selection of unaccountable, unelected quangos operating in silos without any application of common sense. It exemplifies the loss of sovereignty of Parliament, which should be absolute under the 1689 Bill of Rights, which asserted the rights of Parliament and individual rights based on John Locke's philosophy. The outcome was a shocking and avoidable double act of environmental terrorism, when around 300 tonnes of ammonium nitrate, better known as agricultural fertiliser, was dumped in the sea about 12 miles off the coast of my constituency, Great Yarmouth. When I fill my drill fertiliser spinner with fertiliser, I discharge the contents of the double-skinned, weatherproof plastic bag into the hopper and recycle the bag. In this case, the bags were dumped into the sea with the ammonium nitrate in them. They will not biodegrade and will float to the surface after a storm, potentially becoming wrapped around a ship's propeller and shaft, causing extensive damage, not forgetting the vast ecological damage to young fish, the seabed, and the inevitable algal blooms that will follow. To make matters worse, as the elected representative of the good people of Great Yarmouth, I was excluded from all communication and decision-making leading up to the catastrophic dumping operation on the 16th of November 2024. Apart from the terrible outcome, the government's account of events conflict entirely with the local account of events. The locals claim that the DFT/SOSREP drove the process and gave instructions for the sitting MP to be excluded from all communications, convinced that it was a Cobra situation. When finally briefed on the 28th of November by the Honourable Member for Wythenshawe and Sale East at the DFT offices, he stated that the locals had made a mountain out of a molehill, the operation was never Cobra, and the decision to exclude the MP from briefings was a local one. Somebody is clearly lying, and the official briefing pack from the DFT suggests that this is the government. The Honourable Member for Wythenshawe and Sale East told me in an email that he was too busy to see me to answer follow-up questions and suggested I pursue usual parliamentary processes. So here we are. I'm grateful to the Speaker for granting this debate, which seeks to inform the House of where the truth lies. The crux of the issue is the part played by the Health and Safety Executive and their employee, Dr. Nathan Flood. MV Ruby docked in the outer harbour of Great Yarmouth following input from the Secretary of State's representative, SOSREP, on the 28th of October 2024 as a ship in distress carrying 20,000 tonnes of ammonium nitrate. Peel ports are used to handling this material, which is commonly landed at ports and distributed by road, stored on farms and used to grow our food. Peel ports notified the requisite authorities, including HSE, who declined to inspect the ship's cargo. Peel ports began offloading the bags of ammonium nitrate into the sister ship Zimrida. On the 11th of November, Peel ports identified seawater in hold 1 and some staining on the lower bags. Peel ports notified HSE, Dr. Flood, and again requests their attendants to inspect the bags and material. HSE refused to attend and inspect. Peel ports send them photographs and videos of the cargo in hold 1. Peel ports employ their own explosives experts, Dr. Jim Warren and Dr. Charles Owen, to attend and inspect the cargo. They report they could wipe the staining off the bags, concluding it was unlikely that the bags were contaminated. Peel ports again requests HSE attendance, which is refused. Peel ports' view was that they could safely unload the stained bags. The ship previously had carried a cargo of coal onto the dock for analysis and disposal. HSE threatens sanctions and enforcement action against Peel ports if one bag was unloaded onto the dock. I understand that legal responsibility for the material passes from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency to HSE once unloaded. It's also interesting that Norfolk Fire Service attended MV Ruby at this time, on either the 12th or 13th of November, and downgraded the situation. Dr. Flood's attitude was reported by many of the stakeholders to be aggressive, inappropriate and unprofessional, with the use of foul language, even banging his fist on the table, telling people this is going to flatten Great Yarmouth. Analogies to the Beirut explosion are wholly inappropriate and misleading, causing panic amongst both local and national government who have no experience of handling ammonium nitrate. It's incredible that he did this without either a site visit or proper physical analysis of the material before the dumping. Was he too lazy to do what common sense suggested was the correct course of action? Dr. Flood only attended the site and inspected a small number of remaining split bags of material on Monday the 18th of November after being instructed to attend by a minister. I understand he put on a new pair of rubber gloves, which he thrust into the ammonium nitrate, and then threw the gloves onto the table, claiming they smelt of diesel. Other people report that they understandably smelt of new rubber. This was also after the gross act of environmental terrorism. No inspection before dumping is quite extraordinary. This kind of behaviour is not uncommon from HSE, who are a law unto themselves, clearly applying a policy of do as I say, not as I do. The question is who regulates the regulator, and when you understand that HSE is part of the Department of Work and Pensions, no further explanation is necessary or indeed possible. We now find the MMO, MCA, Environment Agency, DEFRA and HSE all blame the dumping on the ship's captain. All other possible sensible options were blocked, but does this silence make them complicit in this catastrophe? I conclude that it does. So I hope the Minister has his pencil ready, because I have 18 urgent questions which I believe need to be answered for the House. Indeed, I will give way.
I would thank for giving way and congratulate him on securing a debate on this topic, which has caused great concern for residents in our neighbouring constituencies. In this case, there appears to have been a total information vacuum for local people, Madam Deputy Speaker, and representatives, which fueled fear and speculation. I've heard from a number of my constituents who contacted me asking simply what is going on. Does the Honourable Gentleman agree with me that in situations like this in future it's important that all relevant agencies provide far greater clarity and transparency for residents and their elected representatives?
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I couldn't agree more. I mean, transparent government must be good government. So I agree entirely. So I have 18 questions, Madam Deputy Speaker. Number one, why did the Honourable Member for Wythenshawe and Sale East tell me on Thursday the 28th of November that this was a local issue? Two, why did the local officials think this was a Cobra situation when the Honourable Member for Wythenshawe and Sale East said categorically it was not? Three, why did the Honourable Member for Wythenshawe and Sale East suggest that local officials had made a mountain out of a molehill? The locals said it was all driven by DTT and SOSREP. Who is lying? 4. Who gave the instruction that the local MP was not to be briefed except by the Department for Transport? Was this because I'm a Reform MP or because I have experience of ammonium nitrate from farming? What were the roles and reports of Andy Gregory, Stephen Benzies and Stefan Hennig? 5. Was the Right Honourable Member for Sheffield Heeley involved in the decision-making? 6. Was the Right Honourable Member for Sheffield Heeley's resignation on Friday the 29th of November in any way linked to the unjustifiable outcome involving dumping of approximately 300 tonnes of potentially contaminated ammonium nitrate with bags? Was it a coincidence that this was less than 24 hours after my briefing by the Department for Transport? 7. Why was it described as potentially contaminated? Was it physically tested before dumping? Is there a certificate to prove that? 8. Why were the polypropylene double-skinned waterproof bags dumped with the ammonium nitrate? When used in farming, the bags are emptied and recycled. 9. Did anyone consider that polypropylene bags float to the surface and damage or destroy a ship's propeller and propeller shaft, apart from being an act of environmental vandalism? 10. Why was the view of Peel ports, experts at handling ammonium nitrate, not acted upon? They claimed that the double-skinned waterproof bags at the bottom were stained but dry. They suggested unloading the dumped material onto the dock for analysis and disposal. Is it true that it becomes the responsibility of HSE once on land? Pictures obtained back up Peel Port's opinion. 11. Why did HSE throw their weight around and threaten prosecution stroke enforcement of Peel Ports if one bag was unloaded onto the dock? 12. Why were local fishermen, local fish markets and Dutch fishing vessels not informed of the decision to dump offshore in my constituency, Great Yarmouth? 13. How close did Great Yarmouth come to evacuation? Why was this withheld from the elected representative of Great Yarmouth? Who knew what and when? 14. Was the balance of the cargo safely unloaded by Peel Ports? 15. Is it fair to say that the owners and operators of MV Ruby were forced into the decision to dump ammonium nitrate in bags at sea? 16. Who signed off on this gross act of environmental terrorism without a test certificate? How can this have happened? 17. Why do both the Harbour Master and Peel Ports agree that this matter was not handled well and the wrong outcome happened? 18. Does this House agree that the government was right to exclude an elected Member of Parliament by diktat, thereby undermining Parliament and showing disrespect for the good people of Great Yarmouth? As G.K. Chesterton observed, a society is in decay, final or transitional, when common sense becomes uncommon. This sorry episode lacked any common sense and resulted in bad decisions from unelected, unaccountable quangos acting in silos. We now need an official parliamentary inquiry, which I very strongly request, having researched the matter in great depth. It must not happen again, and the appropriate heads must roll. And on that note, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I wish you a very happy Christmas, all the parliamentary staff and all my fellow MPs.
Minister, Mike Kane.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is the season of goodwill. And I just want to say, first and foremost, I'm proud of this nation. I think I'm prouder than the honourable gentleman of this nation. The United Kingdom has a proud seafaring heritage, and we are the home of the International Maritime Organisation. We uphold the rule of law in this country, and we treat seafarers with respect and dignity, and we fulfil our legal obligations, and we are proud to be pioneers within the maritime industry. These principles are what informed us about how this situation was handled. The Ruby left Great Yarmouth on the 1st of December with no cargo on board, is now at the port of Tyne, where she is undergoing repairs. The ship carrying the uncontaminated cargo left Great Yarmouth on the 16th of December for onward voyage to the Ruby's original intended destinations. Throughout this situation, my department and other authorities exercise their duty for the safety of the UK and its population, along with the ship and her crew. I stand by all the decisions and actions that we took, and I note that everything has been resolved successfully, as we were always confident it would be the case. I would like now to set out a brief background, if I may. The MV Ruby is a Maltese flag vessel that was damaged during a storm on the 23rd of August 2024, not long after leaving the port in northern Russia. The vessel entered UK waters on the 24th of September 2024 under international legal provisions. that allow for the right of innocent passage through territorial waters. She went to anchor in order to refuel, but at anchor she posed a number of potential risks to the UK interests, namely the safety of navigation for other vessels. And of course, we were worried about the safety of the crew and their welfare and the safety of the ship as well. There were no sanctions issues in relation to the ship, her crew or her cargo, and she was insured at Lloyd's of London, which is internationally regarded as having the highest standards for their clients, as well as strong requirements for the insurance companies who conduct business there. The vessel is also class certified by Det Norsk Veritas, who are one of the 12 world-renowned classification societies within the International Association of Classification Societies. This demonstrated to us that the vessel was operating well within recommended industry guidelines. Now, before entering the port of Great Yarmouth, there had been at anchor for a month. The ship was damaged, the crew was struggling to get basic supplies. At this point, media reported focused on perceived Russian connections of the Ruby, as her origin port was in Russia. This gave potential suppliers fears over Russian exposures and reputational damage, which further impacted the quality of life on board. Beyond this humanitarian aspect, the extent of damage to the hull was unknown, and the practical and environmental consequences of the vessel sinking within UK waters with all her cargo and fuel on board would have been unthinkable. Given all this, and where safety requirements are met, there was no reason to deny access to port. The Secretary of State's representative for Maritime Salvage and Intervention, known as SOSREP, supported the ship's management company in convening conversations with UK ports to identify an appropriate port for offloading of this cargo type and yards where she could then go and be repaired. The ship's management company made the commercial decision to come into the port in the UK for repairs to the vessel. This is because the conditions in the Bay of Biscay at the time, which the vessel would have had to traverse, can be extremely rough at this time of year, and there was a crew of 19 on board who had already suffered through an original storm and subsequent weeks on board a damaged ship. Offering her refuge in port helped to manage all of these risks, and at that point there was no indication of concerns about her cargo. As a bit of background, ammonium nitrate is a compound typically used in fertiliser, as the Honourable Member said, and which the UK regularly imports. In 2023, over 200,000 tonnes of ammonium nitrate was handled at UK ports, and the port of Great Yarmouth is one of the many ports experienced in handling this type of cargo. Once at port, the cargo was safely offloaded for several days before any potential contamination was identified. The Health and Safety Executive was alerted to the potential contamination on Monday the 11th of November as the port identified evidence of seawater, hydrocarbons, fuel oil on the outside of the bags. When it was identified that seawater and hydrocarbons were present on the outside of some of the remaining bags, all movement of cargo in the affected hold was stopped and the relevant authorities notified. HSE undertook a risk assessment and its findings were actioned by the port and the ship operator. The port's harbour master made the decision to issue a direction under the Harbour Docks and Piers Clauses Act 1847, following the guidance provided by the HSE at the cross-agency meeting, and classify her as a dangerous ship. SOSREP was engaged and worked with the ship, port, MCA, HSE to ensure that the ship and the crew were safely removed from port. The ship was removed from port on Sunday the 16th of November and the affected cargo was discharged at the pre-identified location at sea. The master of the ship took the view that in light of deteriorating conditions at sea, an unacceptable risk to the crew of the potentially contaminated material remaining on board at the sea as it became rougher due to the incoming weather front, disposal should commence that evening. The cargo, believed to be contaminated, represented under 2% of the total volumes being transported. Discharging the potential contaminated cargo at sea, about 300 metric tonnes, was not an exercise undertaken lightly. As you would expect, careful and thorough examination of all the alternative options was completed. Full assessment of the environmental implications and safety risks was also undertaken. The work was overseen by our environmental experts and the relevant regulators. The East of England Environment Group was convened for the purposes of this incident and compromised for experts from the Food Standards Agency, the Joint Nature for Conservation Committee, the local authority, the Marine Management Organisation, the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, Natural England, the Environment Agency, and Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Area. The location chosen for disposal was identified as the least sensitive in terms of habitat, flora, fauna and fisheries. The site is an existing aggregate extraction area involving mechanical activity on the seabed. We have been assured by scientific experts from both DEFRA and the East of England Environmental Group that ammonium nitrate is not a persistent chemical, and with sufficient dilution it will dissipate without leaving a trace. As you would expect, DEFRA is now going through the standard procedure of notifying the relevant international authorities of the discharging event, as the British government treats its duties to the natural environment with the highest seriousness. Where safety requirements are met, there is no basis for the UK government to refuse entry into port in these circumstances. After the potentially contaminated cargo had been discharged, the port and ship operator followed the usual processes to enable the MV Ruby to return to Great Yarmouth with advice from the MCA, the HSE and environmental regulators. Allowing the ship to return ensured crew welfare and enabled the normal transfer of its remaining cargo. I must emphasise that there was no evidence that any of the remaining cargo was potentially contaminated, and this was borne out by events. No further contamination was found. I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Member.
For giving way, if there was no potential contamination and if all the processes were duly followed as the Minister is indicating, then presumably the Government will have no problem ensuring that all of this documentation in a transparent and open way is made available in public so that we can have no doubts about that and that any lessons need to be learnt will be learnt.
Well, I thank the Honourable Member. Wish him happy Christmas as well. We share the same dry cleaner in Mr George, who regularly asks after him. I have to say to the Honourable Members opposite, the way this is being raised is a playbook. Assertions are made that are often outlandish, simply wrong. It's designed to appeal to malcontents. A victimisation part comes into that playbook, habitually casts oneself as a victim of dark forces, of conspiracies, of cover-up, always wanting to know where and when and transparency, expecting others to accept the premise of their questions, and then belittling officials and workers who've worked extraordinarily hard, often in difficult circumstances in our seas, to belittle them, to make them see that they are wrong and that they are right. I think there should be a little bit more dignity in the approach taken by members opposite in this matter. I've also had correspondence with officials at North Norfolk County Council, Great Yarmouth Borough Council, as well as the member for Great Yarmouth and North Norfolk, who's not in his seat. I would like to offer my personal gratitude and thanks to the officials at the Health and Safety Executive, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, and Peel Ports in Great Yarmouth for their cooperation and diligent work throughout this period. I would also like to thank the captain and the crew of the ship for their cooperation during this episode. And I'm pleased that by following expert advice, this episode has concluded safely and successfully. Our ports and the men and women who work in them are invaluable assets to our nation. But we can all be guilty of failing to fully recognise the vital role they play in our life of our island nation. And I would also like this debate to record the respect and gratitude of this House has for them and their work. Our Christmases will be a lot merrier thanks to them all. Madam Deputy Speaker, Merry Christmas to you, the staff, and the House, and a blessed new year as well.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.